Yeah. Yeah.
Making these videos has ruffled some feathers. I guess some people find it, maybe obviously very unsettling that, why does Sabrine keep talking about her divorce? And I think the story they tell themselves is that I must not have moved on. But if you really think about it, you guys, I got divorced in 2023 and I speak about it now because I have done the work of sitting with it. I have connected all the dots and I have come out on the other side with a lot of clarity. So I can talk about the hardest part of my year very calmly now without that many emotions because I am no longer in it. So I do think that those are two very different things, and that's the whole point of making these videos. The other reason I keep coming back is that my last few videos resonated with a lot of people. Thank you. And when I went through comments under my last 3 videos, it told me very clearly that the world needs more honest conversations about matters of the heart. So here we are again. Now, do you know what the strangest part about my divorce was? It was not the grief itself. It was that I could not figure out what exactly I was grieving in that moment. Because when I got super honest with myself, I realized that it was not even about the person I had been married to. It was about the future I had built so carefully in my head, the version of myself I had tried to be inside that marriage, and the sheer exhaustion of years of trying that suddenly had nowhere to go. I particularly remember feeling like Sisyphus pushing an enormous rock uphill every single day, except I didn't even realize what I was doing until the rock was finally gone and I was just standing there wondering why my arms still hurt. If any part of that resonates, you are in the right place. I went through a divorce at 30. I remember very clearly the feeling that, my life was over, that I would never find love again, that I had no idea what came next, the fear of the unknown. And the hardest part was not even the heartbreak itself. I don't think there was much of heartbreak at all, which I realized much later. It was that nobody around me fully understood the weight of what I was carrying. The people who loved me showed up and they were absolutely wonderful, but there was quite a gap between how much it hurt and how much of it I could put into words for these people. So this video is me trying to be the person I wish I had back then. But before we get into any practical tips, I really want to sit with this for a moment with you because I think most people need that before they can absorb any advice that I give in this video. So please stick with me for a bit. First things first, what you're feeling is not a malfunction. The doom spiral is normal. Everybody goes through it, I just mentioned some of the feelings or thoughts that crossed my mind after my marriage ended, the same stuff like, oh my God, I'm gonna die alone. I'm never gonna find love again. This is it. I don't know what comes next in my life. My life is absolutely done. I just, in a way, lost a sense of purpose, and that is normal. And underneath all those big, terrifying thoughts, emotions, there was also very practical panic. I had also lost my job in the middle of my divorce, which is the absolute worst thing that can happen to you. I was trying to find an apartment on rent for the first time in years in the US. Then, I remember I had to buy a car. I had never owned a car before moving to the US because before moving to the US, I lived in London where you could hop on a tube and get to wherever you needed to get to. And in most of the US, a car is not optional. It is how you get anywhere, so I had to get one. And just so you know, for extra context, I know I'm digressing a little bit, the car market in 2023 was absolutely bizarre. They had supply chain shortages, which meant that secondhand cars were more expensive than brand new cars, and I had no idea how to research models, negotiate prices, or make sense of loan terms. And my ex-husband, who had said that, oh, I'm gonna help you a little bit, never helped me with anything. So I had to do all of that on my own. And I had this recurring thought that if one more thing went wrong, I would end up sleeping in the car that I was simultaneously terrified of buying. So I am telling you all of this so you understand that catastrophizing is not a sign that you are falling apart. It is a sign that your nervous system is doing exactly what it is supposed to do when it perceives serious threat. When you are flooded with cortisol, your body's primary stress hormone, the part of your brain that is responsible for calm, rational thoughts goes very quiet. And the part that screams danger gets very loud. So if you have been feeling like you cannot think straight, like your emotions are disproportionate to what's in front of you, that is not weakness. That is literally biology doing its job. I also want to say that what you are grieving might not even be what you think. Here is something that I did not understand for a long time, and I think it is one of the most important things I can offer you. By the time my divorce happened, I had already been grieving inside that marriage for years. The emotional distance started almost immediately from even 2 months before the wedding, and the dismissiveness, the stonewalling, and the silent treatment especially, that was not a gradual build-up. It also started from literally a few months into the marriage. So by the time things officially ended, I had lost any real connection to the person I had been married to for all those years, and what I was grieving was not him. It was the version of myself that had tried so hard. The woman who had bent herself into impossible shapes trying to make something work. that was never going to work. And I felt deep sadness for this girl. And honestly, I also felt a lot of shame. Your grief might look completely different. It might be about the future you had mapped out in your head, the years of effort that went nowhere, the community that dissolved when the marriage did, and the version of yourself you misplaced somewhere along the way. And all of it was my body carrying something it had been holding on to for a very long time and finally being allowed to put it down. I want to make sure these pieces feel connected before we move forward. And the reason I'm spending so much time here before we get into anything practical is that I think most people jump straight to advice when what they need first is to feel like they're not alone in feeling the way that they're feeling. And now let's talk about what helps. So what helped me? What the heck did I do? The first thing, understand what rumination is doing to your brain and interrupt it. This is one of the most underestimated obstacles of healing, so I want to spend a moment on it. Every time you replay a painful thought, you are physically strengthening the neural pathway connected to it. Every time you go back to the loop, the argument you are still having in your head, the memory you keep returning to, your brain lays down another layer on that groove. The more you go back, the more automatic the return becomes. It is neuroscience. These are called cognitive distortions that come from the loop of catastrophizing. The sense that things will always feel this bad, the belief that you will never be okay. These almost feel like facts. They're not facts. They are your nervous system under extreme pressure doing its clumsy best to protect you. So what do you actually do? You interrupt the loop physically. The moment you catch yourself in it, you move. You get up, you pace the room, you focus on something you can smell, touch, taste, or see. Your nervous system cannot be in a cortisol spiral and in genuine sensory presence at the same time. And by doing this, you are not suppressing the thought, you are deliberately redirecting your attention. And over time, that redirection weakens the groove. It does not happen overnight, but it does happen. The second thing is radical acceptance is not giving up. It is the only way forward. But at some point, you have to say to yourself, you know what? This happened, it's over. There is no version of the past that is accessible from here. And the energy I spend trying to rewrite is energy I'm stealing from myself right now. Like, you have to reinforce this. I used to wake up and look at myself in the mirror and say something simple, I cannot control what has already happened. I can only control today. That felt very hard and honestly a little lame at first, but you have to give your brain something else to reach for when it defaults to the rumination loop. Positive affirmations is another one. Before you dismiss it as woo-woo, because I grew up in South Asia and I understand the eye roll, positive affirmations are one of the most straightforward ways to do this. Write something true and grounding on a sticky note and put it somewhere you look every single day, your bathroom mirror, your phone screen, whatever, something like, I'm still here, I'm figuring this out, or, it could be your favorite quote. Simple and said enough times, it starts to crowd out the catastrophizing thoughts. Third, move your body even when you really do not want to. Cortisol is a physical hormone. When you are under serious stress, your body floods with it and it needs somewhere to go. You cannot think your way out of a cortisol spike. You have to move it through your system. Walking is extraordinarily effective at this. Every single morning during that period of my life, I walked before work. It was a non-negotiable. And my step goal was 10,000 steps a day. And most days I hit it before I even got to the office just from my morning walk. Slowly, not immediately, but slowly, I started feeling like myself again. Part of that was fitting back into clothes I had bought when I was living in London before that marriage, when I was fully myself, and putting these clothes back on felt like being reintroduced to someone I had really missed. I mentioned this not because it was about how I looked, but it was about the feeling of being at home in my own body again after a long period of being so completely disconnected from it. Movement did that for me. And if you can only start with 10 minutes of walking a day, I'll take it. Start there. The fourth one is, build yourself a cozy bubble and protector. This is actually one of my favorite ones. When I moved into my new apartment after the separation and right before the divorce, I made a deliberate decision. I was not going to bring a single piece of furniture from the home I had shared with my ex-husband. Every chair, every lamp, every piece of shelving from that place stayed there. And I wanted my new space to feel completely untouched by what had come before in my life. So I started from scratch, and in the middle of one of the most difficult chapters of my life, building that space, choosing a set of cutlery I liked, picking a plant, rearranging things until they felt right, taking photos of corners I was really proud of, was a source of real joy for me. A small, steady, reliable source of joy when everything else felt very uncertain. And by the way, when you are going through a breakup or a divorce, you might find that you do not want to socialize at all at that point of time. Maybe you want to stay in your little bubble. And this could be true even if you're an extroverted person. That is completely fine. You are allowed to create a small, cozy world of your own during this time. Some days that might look like cooking something new, watching Korean dramas until midnight, my latest obsession. Some days it might look like a face mask and an audiobook and zero human interaction. All of that is valid. What I found most grounding was forming a routine. I would walk, I would cook a real meal, things I liked. I would listen to audiobooks while I cleaned my apartment. I would talk to a close friend in India at a certain hour every evening. And on weekends, I would find a new place for brunch or go get my nails done or book a deep tissue massage. Like, I did it by myself. I had to get comfortable with enjoying my own company. And these were not necessarily treats, they were medicine for my body. And what a routine gives you is something your nervous system can predict. When everything in your life feels uncertain, a reliable sequence of small things is very stabilizing in a way that is hard to describe until you have felt it. Another one would be declutter your space and your phone. I'm a minimalist and clutter affects my mood directly. So one of the first things I did in my new apartment was to go through everything and donate what I did not need. Boxes I had never unpacked, clothes that did not fit, expired skincare, I just threw that away, shoes I had not worn in years, gone. The feeling afterward was like putting down a bag I had been carrying for so long that I had forgotten it was heavy. There is a real emotional release in cleaning a physical space when you are trying to create a psychological space at the same time. I also went through my phone and moved every photograph and reminder of that chapter of my life onto a hard drive that I put away. And the goal was not to pretend that it had not happened. It was to stop having it surface in my face every time I opened my camera roll. You get to decide what stays in your field of vision right now. So store things out of reach for a while. You can always go back to them later if you want to, but most of the time you will find that you eventually don't even want to go back to those things. Another one is cut the information supply and be ruthless about it. I never felt the urge to look up my ex-husband after the separation. By the time my marriage ended, I had no emotional or physical connection left. But that was me, and I understand if that's not how you're feeling. But even without that particular struggle, I made very deliberate choices about who had access to my life. I blocked literally everybody connected to him. Even if they were like nice people, I just didn't want them in my field of vision. Every piece of information about your ex that enters your nervous system through social media, through mutual contacts, through secondhand updates, restarts the grief cycle. You are pulling the thread and unraveling whatever progress you have made. So I blocked this person and all the people connected to them, and I did it without guilt, and I think you should too. Do not second guess it. I also feel like mutual friends are complicated. Be honest with yourself about who they are really showing up for. Some people handle it gracefully, others enjoy the drama more than they would ever admit. You are not obligated to make it easy for anyone who keeps their foot in both worlds. Like, I personally cannot stand toxic diplomacy. If you need to vent, and you will, do it with people who have absolutely no connection with your ex, people who have no stake in their side of the story. And this is the purest form of self-protection and self-love you can offer yourself. Number 7 is, reconnect with people who knew you before all of this. Something I did not expect when I moved into my own apartment was the wave of people who reached out to me, friends from school, from college, from years before that marriage, people who had known me when I was fully me. What really stuck with me was that some of these people shared a lot of observations they had made about me while I was married. Several of them told me in different ways that they had watched me gradually grow quieter over the years, that my Instagram, which my first love, had become very subdued, that something about me seemed very dimmed. This was like in 2019, which is 3 or 4 years before the divorce. Those conversations were enormously grounding and eye-opening in many ways. These people remembered who I was before I had shrunk myself. So I started going on long walks while calling friends in India. I would wake up to lovely voice notes from people who had nothing to do with my marriage. And there was something about that whole thing that reminded me of my older, softer self. She was still in there and had just been waiting for permission to come back out again. Number 8 is find a version of stillness that works for you. I know that meditation can sound very fluffy and woo-woo. It sounded fluffy to me for most of my life. And, I think it's because I grew up in a culture where introspection was often treated with suspicion. But what I came to understand is that meditation is not about emptying your mind. It is about giving your nervous system a moment to stop being on high alert. After a breakup or a divorce, your nervous system has been on high alert for a very long time. It needs permission to come down. For me, it looked like returning to prayer, which is something I had let go of during my marriage, So I bought myself a prayer mat. I set up a small corner in my apartment with a diffuser and some nice lights and scented candle, and I made it into a ritual. And in those 10 or 15 minutes each day, something in me would loosen. I felt like a lot of peace. If prayer is not part of your world, apps like Headspace, Calm, Oak is a free one. They all offer really wonderful guided meditations where a voice takes you somewhere quieter rather than leaving you alone with your own thoughts. So it's not just music, it's actually a voice guiding you to think about certain things. It's very calming. You should definitely give it a try. Even 5 minutes a day has a measurable effect on your cortisol levels over time. And the science on it is pretty real. Consistent meditation builds gray matter in the part of your brain that's responsible for calm, rational thoughts. So you have to remember that you are building something meaningful even when you sit still. Number 9, my goodness, we have too many. Pay attention to how you are fueling and resetting your body. I want to share what worked for my energy and mood during this period. Please loop in your own doctor before changing anything about your routine. This is my personal experience, not medical advice. I started paying close attention to what I was eating and how it made me feel. And my observation was that when I ate protein-forward meals and kept my blood sugar steady, I had clearer thinking and more stable energy. When I ate like a carb-heavy diet without much intention, I felt slow and foggy and more prone to the spiral, you know? That connection between food and mental state was something I had never really tracked before, and it changed how I approached both. Oof, this 10th one is like, stop waiting for closure from the people who hurt you. Closure is something we tend to wait for from the other person. We want an apology, an explanation, an acknowledgement that what happened was real, you know? And most of the time, especially when there has been real harm, that apology is not coming, you know? And here is what I want to offer you instead. The closure is already there. It is in the behavior, it is in the disrespect, in every moment you were not met where you were. You know, that is the answer to every question you are still carrying, and you do not need them to confirm it. Rather than spending energy wondering why they did not show up for you, redirect that energy into understanding yourself and human relationships at a deeper level. And again, I'm going to sound like a school teacher, but I'm going to give you a list of books. Please bring out a notepad. The first one is this book called Attached by Amir Levine and Rachel Heller, if I'm not wrong. It is the essential guide to adult attachment styles. If you have ever found yourself chasing someone who kept pulling away, this book will give you a language for it. So you have to read it. It's like a must read. Another book is Hold Me Tight by Dr. Sue Johnson. Again, I will keep yapping about it. She calls the anxious avoidance cycle between two people a demon dance, and it will help you understand why you showed up the way you did in that relationship and why the other person behaved the way they did in the relationship. Another book is The Body Keeps the Score. Again, this is something I mentioned by Bessel van der Kolk. You know, it's really essential for understanding how emotional experiences live in the body and what healing really requires. Then there is another book called The 5 Love Languages by Dr. Gary Chapman. This is a popular one, so you may have heard of it. 5 ways people give and receive love. You know, understanding this gap can answer a lot of questions you have been carrying about, you know, I'm doing so much, but why isn't this person receptive? Because maybe you're not loving them in their love language. Another book is What Happened to You by Dr. Bruce Perry and actually Oprah Winfrey. And it is a very compassionate look at how early experiences shape how we respond to pain as adults. I listen to books on Audible, mostly while walking. A chapter a day is enough. You know, give your brain something constructive to reach for rather than that rumination loop. Please get yourself into therapy, or at least find somewhere to put it. In many South Asian households, and this is not for everyone watching, so please take it with a pinch of salt, therapy still carries this weight, you know, like it's something you only do when you have completely fallen apart, or something you keep private because of what people might think, you know. And I want to offer you a completely different frame. Therapy is non-negotiable self-work. It is one of the most meaningful investments you can make in yourself. And I find it to be one of the most attractive qualities in a person, you know, that they take themselves seriously enough to do the uncomfortable work of knowing themselves better. What therapy gave me during my divorce was somewhere to put all of it, you know, the grief, the confusion, the anger, all the things I could not process on my own. And with someone trained specifically to help me do that and to give me the tools was like really helpful. And I do want to say that, you know, your friends love you, but they have their own lives and their own pain to deal with. A therapist's job, on the other hand, is to give all their attention to you and to equip you with the right strategies to help you deal with whatever you're dealing with. And if none of those are accessible right now, no problem. Please write things down. Journaling is one of the most effective emotional processing tools that exists. You do not have to write beautifully. You just have to get the thoughts out of your head and onto a page, because naming something takes away some of its power. So give your thoughts somewhere to go. And then this one's really important. Your timeline belongs to you and nobody else gets a vote. You know, this is one I feel really strongly about, because for anyone watching, especially those who come from South Asian background like me, you know, the pressure around timing in our communities is very real. Get married by a certain age, have children before a certain age, and if you are divorced, the implication is often that your expectations should completely drop. I had matchmakers approach me after my divorce who were clearly operating exactly from that assumption, you know. I had zero interest in that framing, and neither should you. You should absolutely not lower your standards after a divorce, separation, breakup. People say time is ticking as though marriage makes time stop. It does not. I have seen plenty of people who are married with children and are deeply unhappy. And this is, which is why I say that these are nice bells and whistles items to have a partner, to have kids. But I don't think that that should be your set goal in life. You should have an open mind, and I'm sure that you'll find the right person if that is what you want. Again, I don't think that being partnered or in a marriage or having kids is what defines being settled in life. And on the subject of timelines and biology, I know women are fed a lot of fear around fertility windows and age. I know 20-year-olds who have struggled to have kids, and I know women in their 40s who have had healthy babies. I think the biological panic that gets sold to women, especially in our communities, is largely rooted in outdated data and a lot of cultural anxiety that has nothing to do with your actual life or your actual body. When I stopped pouring my energy into finding someone and started pouring into myself, my work, the beginning of my content creation journey, my friendships, my own growth, something shifted in a big way. I stopped attracting the same patterns, and it changed everything about who showed up for me in return. And eventually, I met my person, someone who loves me in a way I had no real reference point for, because what I had experienced in my marriage before that was not love in any form I recognized. It was basically, when I met my partner, it was like steady and warm and completely foreign at first, because I had never experienced love that did not cost me something enormous to maintain. But you have to let yourself heal first, on your own timeline, without apology. And if you ever find yourself spiraling, oh my God, please come back to this video. Okay, lovey, I want to end with something that I think does not get said honestly enough. If you are in the middle of a breakup or a divorce right now, if your life feels like it is crashing down and everything feels doomy and you cannot see what is on the other side, I want you to hear this from somebody who has stood exactly where you are standing right now. It takes time to get there, and the path is not straight, and there will be days that will knock you back, but the version of yourself you will meet on the other side of this, the one who chose to take care of herself or himself when it was hard, who did the work, who showed up for, again, herself or himself over and over again, even when it felt unnatural. You are going to be so proud of this person looking back. I promise you that. If this video resonated with you, I hope you will stick around, because there is a lot more coming. Take care of yourself, lovey, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.